The war had dragged on for months, each battle leaving scars on both humanity and its enemies. The galaxy was weary, its people tired of the constant fighting. Yet amidst the exhaustion, there was a glimmer of hope. Humanity's resilience had earned respect, even admiration, from some of the most powerful factions in the galaxy. The Vaylith, once dismissive of humans as mere pests, now viewed them as formidable opponents. The Korath, too, had begun to see the value in negotiating rather than destroying. It was in this fragile state of balance that Daniel Carter proposed a daring idea: a ceasefire. He knew it wouldn't be easy, neither side trusted the other, but he believed it was the only way to prevent further bloodshed. With Rachel Monroe by his side, he drafted a proposal and presented it at an emergency summit aboard Zetherian Prime. "This war has cost us all dearly," Daniel said, addressing the assembly. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of countless sacrifices. "We've proven we can fight, but now it's time to prove we can find peace." The room fell silent. The Vaylith ambassador clicked sharply, its antennae twitching in irritation. "You speak of peace after bringing destruction upon us?" It hummed, its tone accusatory. "And you speak of justice while expanding your borders without regard for others," Daniel countered, his expression unyielding. "This isn't about blame. It's about survival. If we continue down this path, none of us will prevail." The Korath representative pulsed slowly, its glowing form casting faint light across the chamber. "Your words are bold, human, but actions hold more meaning than speeches. What do you propose?" Daniel took a deep breath before continuing. "A temporary truce, monitored by neutral parties like the Krillin Accord. During this time we can address grievances and work toward lasting solutions. It won't be perfect, but it's better than endless conflict." Silean, the leader of the Krillin Accord, stepped forward. Its shimmering form seemed to radiate calmness. "We are willing to oversee such an agreement if all parties agree." The debate stretched for hours, with arguments flaring and tempers rising. But eventually, under pressure from their own citizens and allies, the Vaylith and Korath reluctantly agreed to the ceasefire. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was a start. Back on Earth, the news sparked mixed reactions. Some celebrated the pause in hostilities, while others feared it was merely a prelude to greater conflict. President Margaret Hayes addressed the nation, urging unity during this critical moment. "We have fought valiantly and we have suffered greatly," she said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Now we must show the same courage in seeking peace as we did in waging war. Our future depends on it." As diplomats worked tirelessly to hammer out the details of the ceasefire, humanity turned its focus inward. Resources were redirected, from military efforts to rebuilding shattered colonies and caring for wounded soldiers. Lila Hart returned to her lab, shifting her focus from weapons to technologies that could improve daily life. She developed new filtration systems for water purification and energy-efficient generators, ensuring that even the smallest settlements could thrive. Rachel Monroe traveled extensively, visiting troops stationed on distant outposts. She listened to their stories, shared meals with them, and reminded them why they had fought so hard. Many confided in her, speaking of lost friends, missed families, and dreams deferred. Rachel carried their words back to Earth, sharing them with leaders who needed to hear the human cost of the war. Admiral Jonathan Hayes oversaw the withdrawal of forces from contested zones, ensuring compliance with the ceasefire terms. It was a delicate process fraught with tension, but Hayes handled it with characteristic precision. Ships returned home bearing flags adorned with Ethan Drake's Phoenix emblem, a symbol of sacrifice and renewal. Meanwhile, Senator Gregory Cole attempted to capitalize on the ceasefire to push his isolationist agenda. He argued that humanity should withdraw entirely from galactic affairs and focus solely on self-preservation. But his message no longer resonated as strongly. Too many people had seen what humanity could achieve when united, and they weren't ready to retreat into isolation. Daniel Carter remained at the forefront of diplomatic efforts, working closely with Silean and other neutral factions to ensure the ceasefire held. He faced skepticism and resistance at every turn, but his determination never wavered. Slowly, trust began to build, not just between humanity and its former enemies, but within humanity itself. One evening, as the ceasefire entered its third month, Daniel found himself alone in a quiet corner of Zetherian Prime. He gazed out at the stars, reflecting on everything that had transpired since his fateful announcement. So much had changed, not just in the galaxy, but within him. "You look thoughtful," Rachel said, joining him unexpectedly. Her presence was comforting, a reminder of the partnership that had carried them through so much. "I was thinking about how far we've come," Daniel admitted. "When I stood up at that first summit and declared we were entering the war, I didn't know if anyone would take me seriously. Now, here we are." Rachel nodded, her expression softening. "It hasn't been easy, but we've done something remarkable. We've shown the galaxy that humanity isn't just another species. We're survivors, innovators, fighters, and maybe peacemakers." Daniel smiled faintly. "Do you think we'll actually get there? Real peace, I mean." "It won't happen overnight," Rachel replied. "But we've taken the first step. That's more than most thought possible." Their conversation was interrupted by a message from Admiral Hayes. A delegation of Valeth and Korath representatives had arrived, requesting a meeting with Daniel and Rachel. Though wary, they agreed to hear them out. The meeting was tense but productive. For the first time, the three factions discussed shared goals rather than mutual grievances. They talked about stabilizing border regions, establishing trade routes, and creating frameworks for resolving disputes without violence. Progress was slow, but it was progress nonetheless. As the weeks turned into months, the ceasefire began to feel less like a temporary measure and more like the foundation for something greater. Humanity's contributions to the effort earned widespread recognition. Colonies rebuilt not just for survival but for prosperity. Farmers cultivated crops using techniques learned from alien allies. Engineers collaborated with Krillin scientists to develop sustainable energy sources. Ethan Drake's legacy lived on, inspiring a new generation of pilots and engineers. Memorials dedicated to him, and to all those who had fallen, were erected across the galaxy. They served as reminders of the cost of war and the importance of striving for peace. In time, Daniel Carter returned to Earth, stepping away from the front lines of diplomacy to spend time with his family. He watched as children played in parks built where ruins once stood, their laughter echoing against freshly painted walls. It was a scene he hadn't dared imagine during the darkest days of the war. Rachel stayed active, traveling between worlds to foster connections and encourage cooperation. She often thought of Ethan, wondering what he might have said about the changes taking place. Would he have approved? She liked to think so. Lila Hart continued her work, her innovations transforming lives across the galaxy. Her name became synonymous with progress, a testament to the power of creativity and perseverance. And so, humanity forged ahead, carving its place among the stars. The road remained uncertain, filled with challenges and compromises. But for the first time, they walked it together, not as outsiders or underdogs, but as equals. Everything had changed since Daniel's announcement. From the chaos of war to the fragile promise of peace, humanity had grown stronger, wiser, and more united. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, but one truth shone brightly. Humanity belonged among the stars, and as long as they remembered the lessons of their past, the sacrifices made, the alliances formed, and the dreams pursued, they would continue to shape their destiny. The next morning, Kale woke up feeling a mix of dread and determination. He had spent most of the night replaying the events of the previous day in his mind, analyzing every awkward moment and misstep. The image of Alex's stern face loomed, large in his thoughts, making it hard to sleep. Today, he told himself firmly, would be better. He couldn't afford to let his nerves get the best of him again. After a quick breakfast of unfamiliar foods, dry toast and something called orange juice, Kyle was escorted back to the conference room by Mia. She seemed kinder than the others, always ready with a reassuring smile or a gentle word. You'll get used to it, she said as they walked down the long hallway. Humans can seem a bit intense at first, but we're not so bad once you get to know us. Cale nodded politely, though he wasn't entirely convinced. Intense was an understatement when it came to Alex Carter. The man radiated authority, his every movement deliberate and commanding. Cale couldn't help but feel like he was constantly being judged, even when Alex wasn't looking directly at him. When they arrived at the conference room, Alex was already there, seated at the head of the table with a stack of papers in front of him. His posture was rigid, his arms crossed over his chest as he reviewed the documents. He glanced up briefly when Cale entered, giving a curt nod before returning his attention to the papers. "Good morning," Cale ventured cautiously, taking his seat across from Alex. His voice was quieter than usual, almost drowned out by the hum of the overhead lights. "Morning," Alex replied without looking up. His tone was clipped, businesslike. It wasn't unfriendly exactly, but it lacked warmth. Cale fidgeted nervously, adjusting the translator device clipped to his collar. He wished he could blend into the background, invisible to everyone in the room. But that wasn't possible, not when all eyes were on him. The other humans trickled in one by one, filling the chairs around the table. Some greeted Cale with polite nods. Others barely acknowledged his presence. To them, he realized, he was just another diplomat, another alien trying to navigate their complicated world. As the meeting began, Kyle struggled to keep up. The human spoke quickly, jumping from topic to topic without pausing to explain things in detail. Terms like resource allocation and mutual defense agreements flew past him, leaving him scrambling to jot down notes. His translator device beeped incessantly, struggling to process the rapid-fire dialogue. At one point, he accidentally knocked over his glass of water, spilling it across the table. The sound echoed loudly in the quiet room, drawing startled looks from everyone. "I'm so sorry," Cale stammered, grabbing napkins to clean up the mess. His hands trembled as he dabbed at the wet spots, his face flushing with embarrassment. "It's fine," Alex said sharply, sliding his papers out of the way. "Just focus on the discussion." Kyle nodded mutely, shrinking back into his chair. He felt like a child caught doing something wrong, scolded for a mistake he hadn't meant to make. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of discomfort and self-doubt. By the time it ended, Kyle was desperate for a break. On his way out of the room, he overheard Alex talking to Mia. They were standing near the door, their voices low but audible. "He's worse than I expected," Alex said, shaking his head. "Delicate little thing, isn't he?" Cale froze mid-step, his heart sinking. Delicate. That was how Alex saw him. Fragile, weak, incapable of handling the demands of diplomacy. The words stung more than Kyle cared to admit. He forced himself to keep walking, pretending he hadn't heard anything, but the comment lingered in his mind long after the meeting ended. Later that afternoon, Kyle found himself alone in the facility's observation lounge. It was a small, quiet space with large windows overlooking Earth's sky, a swirling expanse of blue and white clouds. He stood there for a while, watching the sunlight filter through the glass, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He had always prided himself on his ability to adapt, to remain composed under pressure, yet here he was, crumbling under the weight of human expectations. Mia joined him after a while, carrying 2 cups of tea. She handed one to Cale with a warm smile. "Thought you might need this," she said softly. "It's chamomile. Helps with stress." Kyle accepted the cup gratefully, wrapping his fingers around its warmth. "Thank you," he murmured. "I appreciate it." "You're doing okay," Mia assured him, leaning against the railing beside him. "It's normal to feel overwhelmed at first. Even seasoned diplomats have trouble adjusting sometimes." Kyle hesitated, debating whether to confide in her. Finally, he decided to take the risk. "Major Carter doesn't think so," he admitted quietly. "He called me delicate." Mia frowned, her expression softening with sympathy. "Don't take it personally. Alex is tough on everyone. He doesn't mean to come off as harsh, it's just his way. Deep down, he respects people who try their best. Kyle looked at her skeptically. Are you sure about that? She chuckled lightly. Trust me. I've known Alex for years. He's not as scary as he seems. Give him time and he'll warm up to you. Time. That was something Kale wasn't sure he had. Every interaction with Alex felt like a test, a chance to prove himself worthy of respect. But how could he earn that respect when he couldn't even hold his own in a simple conversation? That evening, Kale attended another meeting, a smaller gathering focused on cultural exchange programs. The atmosphere was less formal this time, with fewer people in attendance. Alex was there, of course, seated across from Kale with his usual air of authority. This time, however, Kale noticed something different about him. When Alex spoke, his tone was calmer, less abrasive. He listened carefully to the others, nodding occasionally to show he understood. Encouraged by this subtle shift, Kale decided to speak up. In my culture, he began hesitantly, we place great value on storytelling. Sharing experiences helps us understand each other better. Perhaps we could incorporate that into our exchanges. The room fell silent for a moment as everyone turned to look at him. Kale's heart raced, but he forced himself to continue. For example, we could host events where both humans and my people share stories about our histories. It might foster greater empathy between us. To his surprise, Alex nodded thoughtfully. Not a bad idea, he said, his voice neutral but not unkind. We could use more initiatives like that. Kyle blinked, momentarily stunned. Had Alex just complimented him? Before he could dwell on it too much, the conversation moved on to other topics. Still, that brief acknowledgement gave Kale a glimmer of hope. Maybe Alex wasn't completely immune to his efforts after all. As the meeting wrapped up, Alex approached Kale with a folder in hand. Here, he said, handing it over. These are some additional materials you might find useful. Read them tonight and we'll discuss them tomorrow. Kyle took the folder, surprised by the gesture. Thank you, Major Carter, he said, sincerely. I will. Alex studied him for a moment, his piercing gaze searching Kyle's face. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Kyle watched him go, clutching the folder tightly. For the first time since arriving on Earth, he felt a flicker of confidence. He still had a long way to go, but perhaps he wasn't as hopeless as he'd feared. With a renewed sense of purpose, he returned to his quarters, determined to rise to the challenge. That night, as he pored over the materials Alex had given him, Kyle allowed himself a small smile. Humans were complicated, unpredictable beings, but maybe, just maybe, they weren't as terrifying as the stories had led him to believe. The next morning brought a surprise for Kale. Instead of another formal meeting, Alex had arranged for a tour of the facility. It was meant to give Kale a better understanding of how things worked on Earth, but Kale suspected it was also a test, a chance for Alex to see how well he could adapt outside the confines of a conference room. Either way, Kale was determined to make the most of it. Mia accompanied them again, her cheerful demeanor providing a welcome contrast to Alex's stoic presence. We'll start with the research labs, she said as they walked down the hallway. That's where we study new technologies and analyze data from other species. Kale nodded, trying to appear calm despite the butterflies in his stomach. He still wasn't sure what to expect from this day, but he knew one thing. He couldn't afford to embarrass himself again. Not after the small progress he'd made the previous evening. The first stop was a sprawling laboratory filled with glowing screens, humming machines, and humans in white coats moving briskly between stations. One scientist, a young man named Chris, greeted them warmly and began explaining their work. Kale listened intently, asking questions whenever he didn't understand something. To his relief, Chris seemed genuinely pleased by his interest. This is fascinating, Kale said at one point, gesturing toward a device that resembled a crystalline sphere. What does it do? Chris grinned, clearly enjoying the opportunity to explain. It's a prototype energy converter. If it works, it could revolutionize power generation for both our species. Kale leaned closer, studying the intricate patterns etched into the surface of the sphere. For the first time since arriving on Earth, he felt truly engaged. The technology was different from anything he'd seen before, more mechanical than organic, but it sparked his curiosity in a way he hadn't anticipated. Alex stood nearby, watching silently as Kale interacted with Chris. There was no trace of impatience or disapproval in his expression. Instead, he seemed almost thoughtful. Kyle noticed this subtle shift and found himself smiling faintly. Maybe Mia was right. Maybe Alex wasn't as intimidating as he appeared. After leaving the lab, they moved on to the recreation area, a large open space designed for relaxation. Humans were scattered throughout, some playing games, others chatting casually. Kyle paused to observe them, marveling at how easily they laughed and joked with each other. Back home, social interactions were more structured, less spontaneous. Here it seemed like everyone was constantly communicating, sharing bits of themselves without hesitation. "Do you ever play games?" Mia asked, breaking Kale out of his thoughts. He blinked, unsure how to respond. "Not like these," he admitted. "Our games are quieter, more about strategy than physical skill." "Well, maybe you should try something new while you're here," she suggested with a grin. Before Kale could protest, she led him over to a table where two humans were playing a game involving flat, colorful tiles. "This is chess," she explained. "It's a classic human game. You might enjoy it." Kale hesitated, glancing at Alex. The Major shrugged indifferently, though there was a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Encouraged by this tiny sign of approval, Kale agreed to give it a try. One of the players, a woman named Lisa, patiently taught him the rules while the others looked on. At first, Kale struggled to grasp the concept. The pieces moved in unpredictable ways, and the board seemed chaotic compared to the orderly patterns of his own games. But as the match progressed, he began to see the underlying logic. Each move required careful thought, strategic planning. It reminded him of negotiations where every decision carried weight. By the end of the game, Kale had lost spectacularly, but he didn't mind. He thanked Lisa for teaching him, feeling a sense of accomplishment despite the outcome. "I think I understand now," he said, turning to Mia. "It's not just about winning. It's about learning." She beamed at him. "Exactly. You're catching on fast." As the day wore on, Kale grew more comfortable in his surroundings. He even managed to laugh when Alex teased Mia about her poor aim during a friendly dart game. The sound surprised him. It was light, genuine, and completely foreign. He hadn't realized how tense he'd been until that moment, how much he'd been holding back. During a break, Alex pulled Kale aside. They stood near a window overlooking the facility grounds, the sunlight casting long shadows across the floor. "You're doing better," Alex said bluntly, his tone softer than usual. "Still got a lot to learn, but you're improving." Kale stared at him, stunned by the unexpected praise. "Thank you," he replied quietly. "I'm trying my best." "I know," Alex said, nodding. "And that counts for something. Most people wouldn't admit they don't know everything, not around here anyway." For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Kale felt a strange connection pass between them. It wasn't friendship exactly, but it was something. A mutual. Understanding that went beyond words. Kale broke the gaze first, looking away to hide the flush creeping up his neck. Later that afternoon, they visited the communications hub, a bustling center where messages were sent and received across vast distances. Kale watched in awe as technicians coordinated transmissions with ships orbiting Earth and relayed updates to distant colonies. The scale of it all was overwhelming, yet oddly beautiful. "What do you think of all this?" Alex asked, standing beside him. Kale hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It's impressive, he said finally. "Your people have achieved so much in such a short time. On my planet, progress is slower. We take centuries to develop new ideas. Watching yours unfold in decades, it's remarkable." Alex raised an eyebrow, surprised by the sincerity in Kale's voice. "Not all of it's good," he admitted. "Humans mess up a lot. We destroy as much as we create. But yeah, I guess we've done some decent stuff too. Kale smiled faintly. Even destruction can lead to growth, he said. Isn't that why we're here? To learn from each other, to build something stronger together? Alex studied him for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to Kale's astonishment, he chuckled softly. You're smarter than you look, Diplomat. The comment caught Kale off guard, but he didn't take offense. Instead, he felt a spark of pride. For the first time, he realized that Alex wasn't just testing him. He was challenging him, pushing him to grow. And strangely enough, Kale found himself enjoying the challenge. As the tour came to an end, Kale reflected on everything he'd learned that day. He'd discovered new technologies, played unfamiliar games, and even exchanged a few laughs with the humans. But more importantly, he'd begun to see Alex in a different light. Beneath the tough exterior was someone who cared deeply about his work, someone willing to guide others, even timid aliens like Kale, if they proved themselves worthy. That night, as Kale prepared for bed, he found himself thinking about Alex more than he expected. There was something compelling about the human, something that drew Kyle in despite his fears. Was it respect, admiration, or was it something deeper, something he wasn't ready to acknowledge yet? Whatever it was, Kyle knew one thing for certain. His time on Earth was changing him in ways he never imagined. The next day started like any other, with Kale waking up early and reviewing the notes he'd taken during his time on Earth. He was beginning to feel more confident, though his nerves still flared whenever he thought about facing Alex or the other humans. Still, he reminded himself that progress came in small steps. Each day he learned a little more about their world and about himself. But today would be different. As Kale arrived at the facility, he noticed an unusual tension in the air. The humans moved quickly through the hallways, their faces tight with concern. Mia greeted him outside the conference room, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by something closer to worry. Something's happened, she said quietly, ushering him inside. There's been a threat against the negotiations. Kale froze, his heart skipping a beat. What kind of threat? Mia hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. A group of extremists. They don't want us working with your people. Last night they tried to break into the facility. Luckily, security stopped them before they could do any real damage. Kyle's mind raced. Extremists? He had heard whispers of such groups back home, individuals who opposed alliances with other species, but he hadn't expected to encounter them here. Earth was supposed to be safe, a place where diplomacy could thrive without fear of violence. Yet now danger loomed closer than ever. Alex entered the room moments later, his expression grim. We need to act fast, he said, addressing everyone present. These people won't stop until they've caused chaos. We have to protect the mission and each other. Kale listened intently as Alex outlined a plan. Extra guards would patrol the facility and all meetings would take place in secure locations. For now, everyone was advised to stay alert and report anything suspicious. Kale nodded along, though his stomach churned with unease. How could he contribute when he felt so out of his depth? As the meeting ended, Alex approached Kale. Stay close to me today, he said firmly. I don't trust these cowards not to try again. Kale swallowed hard but nodded. Okay. For the rest of the morning, Kale stuck by Alex's side, following him wherever he went. They visited several secured areas within the facility, ensuring that safety protocols were in place. At one point, Alex handed Kale a small device. This is a panic button, he explained. If anything happens, press it, and help will come immediately. Kale accepted the device, clutching it tightly in his hand. It was heavier than it looked, a constant reminder of the danger lurking nearby. Despite his fear, he appreciated Alex's effort to keep him safe. The human might have been blunt and intimidating at times, but his actions showed a level of care that Kale hadn't anticipated. By mid-afternoon, the atmosphere grew even tenser. Reports came in of another attempted breach near the perimeter fence. Security teams scrambled to respond, while those inside the facility braced for the worst. Kyle found himself pacing nervously, unable to sit still. Every sound made him jump, Every shadow seemed threatening. Then it happened. An explosion rocked the building, sending a shockwave through the walls. Alarms blared, and lights flickered overhead. Kyle stumbled backward, nearly losing his balance as debris rained down from the ceiling. Shouts filled the air as humans rushed to evacuate the area. "Stay with me," Alex barked, grabbing Kyle's arm and pulling him toward a nearby doorway. His grip was firm but not painful, anchoring Kyle amidst the chaos. They ran together, dodging falling objects and navigating smoke-filled corridors. Kyle's lungs burned and his legs ached, but he forced himself to keep moving. Behind them, shouts turned to screams as the attackers breached the outer defenses. Gunfire echoed in the distance, sharp and terrifying. "This way," Alex shouted, leading Kyle into a storage room. He slammed the door shut behind them and locked it, then pulled out his communicator. "We need backup in Sector B," he yelled into the device. "Now!" Kyle crouched low, his body trembling as he struggled to catch his breath. The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of emergency lights. He could hear Alex breathing heavily beside him, the sound oddly comforting despite the circumstances. "You all right?" Alex asked, his voice softer now. I think so," Kyle replied, though his voice wavered. "Thank you for keeping me safe." Alex grunted, leaning against the wall. "Don't mention it. That's my job." For a few minutes they sat in silence, listening to the sounds of battle raging outside. Kyle's mind raced with questions. Would they survive this? What would happen to the negotiations if the extremists succeeded? And why did Alex risk his life to protect someone like him? Finally, Alex broke the silence. "You're stronger than you look, you know that?" Kyle blinked, surprised by the comment. "I don't feel strong." "Well, you are," Alex insisted. "Not many people could handle what you've been through these past few days. You're adapting, learning, even thriving in some ways. That takes guts." Kyle stared at him, unsure how to respond. No one had ever called him strong before, not like this. Most of his peers back home saw him as timid, cautious, to a fault. But Alex saw something else, something Kyle wasn't sure he recognized yet. Before he could dwell on it too much, the door burst open, revealing a team of armed guards. "Clear," one of them announced, motioning for Alex and Kyle to follow. They emerged into the hallway, which was now eerily quiet. The attackers had been driven back, at least for now. Smoke lingered in the air, and the scent of burnt metal stung Kyle's nose. He glanced around, taking in the damage. A shattered window here, a scorched wall there. The facility had survived, but barely. Alex placed a hand on Kyle's shoulder. "Let's get you somewhere safe," he said, guiding him toward an underground bunker designed for emergencies. Along the way, Kyle noticed the way Alex scanned their surroundings, his eyes sharp and alert. This was a man who thrived under pressure, who protected others without hesitation. It was impossible not to admire him. Once they reached the bunker, Kyle sank onto a bench, feeling drained. Mia joined them shortly after, carrying supplies and updates from the surface. "They've contained the situation," she reported, "but we'll need to stay down here for a while just in case." Kyle nodded absently, his thoughts still swirling. He replayed the events of the day in his mind, the explosion, the escape, the way Alex had shielded him from harm. Why had the human done that? Was it simply duty, or was there something more? As the hours passed, Kyle began to relax slightly. The bunker was cramped but secure, and the presence of others helped ease his anxiety. At one point, Alex sat beside him, offering a bottle of water. "You did good today," he said simply. Kyle looked at him, searching his face for sincerity. "I didn't do anything special." "Yes, you did," Alex countered. "You stayed calm, followed instructions, and trusted me to get you out of there. That's not easy, especially for someone in your position." Kyle hesitated, then decided to speak his mind. "Why did you protect me?" "I'm just an alien, a stranger." Alex frowned, clearly caught off guard by the question. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said after a pause. "And because you matter." To the mission, to your people, and, well, to me. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Kyle felt his cheeks warm, though he couldn't tell if it was from embarrassment or something else entirely. Did Alex mean what he thought he meant? Or was he reading too much into it? Before Kale could ask, Mia interrupted with news that reinforcements had arrived and the situation was under control. They would be able to return to the main part of the facility soon. Relief washed over Kale, though a part of him wished they could stay in the bunker a little longer, just him and Alex away from prying eyes. When they finally emerged from the bunker, the facility was quieter than before. Cleanup crews worked tirelessly to repair the damage, while security teams patrolled the area. Kyle walked alongside Alex, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. "You should get some rest," Alex said eventually. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Kyle nodded, though he wasn't sure he'd be able to sleep. Too much had happened. Too many emotions swirled inside him. But one thing was certain. His feelings for Alex were growing stronger. And whether he liked it or not, he knew he couldn't ignore them forever. As he prepared for bed that night, Kale replayed Alex's words in his mind. "Because you matter." Simple, yet profound. For the first time since arriving on Earth, he allowed himself to imagine a future where he belonged. Not just as a diplomat, but as someone worthy of trust, respect, and maybe even love. The days following the attack passed in a blur of heightened security and tense negotiations. The facility had been locked down tighter than ever, with armed guards stationed at every entrance and surveillance drones patrolling the perimeter. Despite these precautions, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that danger still lingered nearby. Every shadow seemed darker, every sound louder. It didn't help that his mind kept replaying the chaos of the attack, the explosion, the smoke, Alex's hand gripping his arm as they ran for safety. But there was something else too, something Kale hadn't expected, a growing sense of closeness between him and Alex. Since the attack, their interactions had shifted subtly. Alex was still stern and efficient, but there were moments when his guard dropped, when he smiled faintly at one of Kale's questions or offered an encouraging nod during meetings. These small gestures meant more to Kale than words could express. They reminded him that despite everything, he wasn't alone. One evening, after another long day of discussions, Kale found himself sitting in the observation lounge again. He often came here to think, drawn to the quiet beauty of Earth's sky. Tonight, however, he wasn't alone. Alex joined him unexpectedly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," Alex said, handing one to Kale. His tone was casual, almost friendly. Kale accepted the cup gratefully, wrapping his fingers around its warmth. "Thank you," he murmured. I didn't expect to see you here." Alex shrugged, leaning against the railing beside him. "Needed some air. Figured I'd check on you while I was at it." Kyle glanced at him, surprised by the admission. "Check on me?" "You've been through a lot lately," Alex replied, staring out at the horizon. "Just wanted to make sure you're holding up okay." Kale hesitated, unsure how much to share. "I'm managing," he said finally. "It's not easy, but I'm learning." "That's all anyone can ask for," Alex said with a faint smile. "You're doing better than most would in your position." Kyle felt a flicker of pride at the compliment, though he quickly pushed it aside. He took a sip of his coffee, savoring the bitter taste. It was strong, just the way Alex liked. So Mia had told him once. Somehow knowing that made the moment feel even more personal. "I've been thinking," Kale began cautiously, setting the cup down on the railing, "about what happened during the attack. You saved my life." Alex waved a hand dismissively. "It's my job, nothing special." "It was to me," Kyle insisted, his voice soft but firm. "Back home, no one has ever done something like that for me. Not because they didn't care, but because, well, I've always been the one people looked past." Alex turned to face him, his expression thoughtful. Maybe they didn't know what they were missing. Kyle blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in Alex's voice. He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, unsure what to say. Instead, he focused on the view outside, watching as clouds drifted lazily across the sky. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. Instead, it felt natural, like a shared understanding passing between them. Finally, Alex broke it. "You've got guts, you know that?" he said, his tone lighter now. "Not many people would step into a situation like this, especially someone like you." "Someone like me?" Kyle echoed, raising an eyebrow. "You know what I mean," Alex replied with a chuckle. "Timid alien diplomat terrified of humans, remember?" Kale laughed softly, shaking his head. "I'm not as scared of humans anymore." "Good," Alex said, his smile widening slightly. "Means I'm doing my job right." The comment brought a fresh wave of warmth to Kale's chest. He studied Alex's profile, noting the way the fading sunlight highlighted his sharp features. There was strength in his jawline, determination in his eyes, but also kindness, if you knew where to look. And Kale was starting to see it clearly. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Kale decided to take a risk. "Alex," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Sure," Alex replied, turning to face him. "What is it?" Kyle hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it, the moment he'd been dreading and anticipating all at once. "Do you feel anything for me? Beyond duty, I mean." The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. For a moment, Alex said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, he nodded. "I won't lie to you," he said, his voice low and steady. "You've grown on me. More than I expected, honestly. But this isn't simple, Kale. Humans and aliens, we're different. What happens when the mission ends, when you go back to your world and I stay here?" Kale swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. "I don't know," he admitted. "All I know is that being near you makes me feel alive. Like I'm part of something bigger than myself. Isn't that worth exploring?" Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated," he muttered. "We have responsibilities, rules. If anyone found out—" "We don't have to tell anyone," Kyle interrupted, his voice tinged with desperation. "Not yet anyway, just give us a chance. Please." Alex stared at him for a long moment, his gaze piercing but not unkind. Then finally he nodded. "All right," he said softly. "But we do this carefully. No mistakes." Relief washed over Kale, followed by a surge of joy he couldn't contain. He reached out tentatively, placing a hand on Alex's arm. "Thank you," he whispered, "for trusting me." Alex covered Kale's hand with his own, squeezing gently. "Don't thank me yet," he said with a wry grin. "This is going to be tricky." Over the next few days, their relationship deepened cautiously. They stole moments together whenever they could, quiet conversations in empty hallways, lingering glances across crowded rooms. Kale cherished each interaction, finding comfort in Alex's presence even amidst the stress of negotiations. At the same time, he couldn't ignore the weight of secrecy pressing down on them. Every smile, every touch carried the risk of discovery. Mia noticed the change between them first. She cornered Kale one afternoon, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. "Something's different about you," she said, folding her arms. "And Major Carter seems less grumpy than usual. Did something happen?" Kyle froze, panic rising in his chest. "No, nothing happened," he stammered, avoiding her gaze. "Why would you think that?" "Oh, come on," Mia teased, rolling her eyes. "I've seen the way you two look at each other. Don't worry, I won't say anything. Just be careful, okay?" Kyle nodded, relief flooding through him. "Thank you, Mia, I mean it." She smiled warmly, patting his shoulder. "Anytime. Just don't let him push you around too much." Despite Mia's reassurance, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that their secret wouldn't stay hidden forever. The stakes were high, not just for them personally, but for the entire mission. If anyone discovered their connection, it could jeopardize everything they'd worked so hard to achieve. One night, as they sat together in the bunker where they'd taken refuge during the attack, Alex voiced the same concern. "We can't keep this up forever," he said, his tone serious. "Sooner or later, someone will figure it out." "I know," Kyle replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't want to lose what we have. Not yet." Alex sighed, pulling Kale closer until their shoulders touched. "Neither do I. But we'll need to decide soon. What happens next?" Kale leaned into the embrace, drawing strength from Alex's warmth. "Let's focus on finishing the mission first," he suggested. "Once the negotiations are complete, we'll figure out the rest." Alex nodded, resting his chin on top of Kale's head. "Agreed. One step at a time." As they sat there in the dim light, surrounded by reminders of the attack that had brought them closer together, Kale allowed himself to dream. He imagined a future where they didn't have to hide, where their differences weren't obstacles but strengths. It was a fragile hope, built on uncertainty and compromise. But it was enough, for now. Because for the first time in his life, Kale felt truly seen, and that made all the risks worthwhile. The final days of the negotiations arrived, bringing with them a mix of excitement and tension. Kyle had spent weeks building bridges between his people and humanity, navigating misunderstandings, overcoming fears, and proving himself as a capable diplomat. Now, as the talks neared their conclusion, he felt a sense of accomplishment that was both exhilarating and bittersweet. The mission was almost over. But what would happen afterward? Would his connection with Alex survive beyond the confines of this facility? On the morning of the last meeting, Kale woke up earlier than usual. He stood by the window in his quarters, watching the sunrise paint the sky in soft hues of gold and pink. His mind raced with thoughts of the future, of returning home, leaving Earth behind and saying goodbye to Alex. It wasn't just fear of separation that weighed on him. It was the uncertainty of whether their bond could endure the distance. When he arrived at the conference room, Alex was already there reviewing documents at the head of the table. For a moment, Kyle hesitated in the doorway, taking in the sight of the human who had become so important to him. Alex looked up, catching his gaze, and gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement that carried more meaning than words. "Ready?" Alex asked as Kale approached. Kale nodded, though his stomach churned with nerves. "As ready as I'll ever be." The meeting began with a formal presentation of the proposed treaty. Representatives from both sides took turns outlining its key points: trade agreements, cultural exchanges, joint research initiatives, and mutual defense clauses. Kyle listened intently, occasionally interjecting to clarify or emphasize certain aspects. Despite his lingering anxiety about the future, he spoke with confidence, drawing on everything he'd learned during his time on Earth. At one point, Alex leaned over to whisper something to him. "You're doing great," he said, his voice low enough for only Kale to hear. "Keep going." Kale managed a small smile, grateful for the encouragement. Knowing that Alex believed in him gave him strength, even when doubt crept in. By the end of the session, the treaty had been finalized. Both parties agreed to sign it later that day in a formal ceremony. Cheers erupted in the room as humans and aliens alike celebrated the historic achievement. Kale felt a surge of pride, not just for himself but for everyone who had worked tirelessly to make this moment possible. Afterward, Alex pulled Kale aside. "Well done," he said, his tone gruff but sincere. "You've earned this." "Thank you," Kale replied softly. "I couldn't have done it without your help." Alex raised an eyebrow, smirking faintly. "Don't get sentimental on me now. We've still got work to do." But Kale knew better. Beneath Alex's tough exterior was someone who cared deeply, not just about the mission but about him, and that knowledge filled him with hope. Later that afternoon, the signing ceremony took place in a grand hall adorned with banners representing both species. Cameras flashed as dignitaries from both sides gathered around the table, pens poised, to seal the agreement. Kyle stood beside his own leaders, feeling a mix of pride and melancholy. This was the culmination of everything he'd worked for, but it also marked the beginning of the end of his time on Earth. As the ceremony concluded, applause echoed through the room. Cale stepped back, allowing others to take center stage, and found Alex standing nearby. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment they shared an unspoken understanding. Whatever came next, they would face it together. That evening, Mia organized a small celebration in the observation lounge. Humans and aliens mingled freely, sharing laughter and stories as music played softly in the background. Kyle lingered, near the windows, sipping a glass of sparkling water and reflecting on the whirlwind of emotions coursing through him. Alex joined him after a while, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing one to Kyle. Kale accepted it with a grateful smile. "You always seem to know what I need." "It's part of my charm," Alex joked, though his expression softened as he studied Kyle. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," Kale admitted. "It's strange, isn't it? Everything we've worked for is finally here, but it feels incomplete somehow." Alex nodded, his gaze drifting toward the stars outside. "Yeah, I know what you mean." They stood in silence for a while, letting the weight of the moment settle between them. Finally, Kale spoke. "What happens now? After I leave, I mean?" Alex sighed, setting his cup down on the railing. "We'll figure it out. It won't be easy, but we've faced harder things before." Kyle turned to look at him, searching his face for reassurance. "Do you really think we can make this work?" "I don't know," Alex admitted. "But I'm willing to try if you are." Tears welled in Kale's eyes, though he blinked them away quickly. "I want to try," he whispered. "More than anything." Alex reached out, placing a hand on Kale's shoulder. "Then we will, one step at a time." The next morning, Kyle prepared to depart. His transport awaited him on the landing platform, glowing softly under the pale light of dawn. As he made his way there, he was surrounded by well-wishers, humans and aliens alike, congratulating him on a job well done. But his heart ached most for the person waiting at the edge of the crowd. Alex stood apart from the others, his posture rigid, but his eyes warm. When Kyle approached, he extended a hand. "Take care of yourself," he said, his voice steady, despite the emotion in his gaze. Kyle shook his hand, then impulsively pulled Alex into a hug. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice breaking slightly. "For everything." Alex returned the embrace tightly, speaking softly into Kale's ear. "This isn't goodbye. Not really. We'll see each other again." Kale nodded, stepping back reluctantly. "I believe you." As he boarded the transport, Kale glanced back one last time. Alex was still standing there watching him go. Though sadness tugged at his heart, Kale felt a spark of hope. They had overcome so much already. Surely, they could find a way to bridge the gap between their worlds. The transport lifted off, carrying Kale high above Earth's atmosphere. From his seat, he gazed out the window, marveling at the planet below. It was vast and chaotic, full of contradictions, and yet it had given him something precious, a chance to grow, to connect, and to love. Back on Earth, Alex remained on the platform long after the transport disappeared from view. He looked up, at the sky, a faint smile playing on his lips. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to dream of a future where boundaries didn't matter, and where love could transcend even the stars.